Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well. We've got a fantastic show on the way. But first, I just want to say thanks to NordVPN, our sponsors here at the Everything is Black and White podcast, who without none of this would be possible. And we've teamed up with them to offer our listeners and viewers an exclusive offer. You can click the link in the podcast description box or go to nordvpn.com/tune to sign up and save your pennies on a plan. It is well worth your time to sign up. You are secure, you are safe, and you're supporting the podcast. Why sign up? I hear you ask. Well, there are a host of benefits. For me, it is the value for money because one subscription can be used across 10 devices. That's your work phone, your personal phone, your tablet, what have you. 10 devices, one subscription. I mean, that is the definition of value for money. The other thing I love about it as well is the way that it keeps your details safe and secure when browsing on public Wi-Fi. So if you're on the bus, the train, you're in a cafe and you're connected to their Wi-Fi, there is always the risk that your details could be compromised. That's your bank details, your passwords, and a load of other stuff as well. But with Nord, you are safe and you are secure. And that for me means a heck of a lot. And look, if you're going abroad as well and you're missing your home comforts and you want to keep with it with all your UK streaming services, then you can click the location back to the UK and make sure you never miss your favorite program. What is not to love about it? It's absolutely fantastic. Very simple to get on board. You download the app, you sign up, and away you go. You're keeping yourself safe, you're keeping yourself secure, and you're supporting the podcast at the same time. And another benefit, and I've already mentioned three, and there are a host of other things to mention as well if we had the time. But the final thing I'm going to mention is a 30-day money back guarantee. So it's literally no risk. If you don't like it, get your money back. But you will like it because it's a superb app to have on your phone. Keeps you safe, keeps you secure. And once again, you're supporting the podcast. So click the link or go to nordvpn.com/tune to take advantage of an exclusive offer for our listeners and viewers of the Everything is Black and White podcast. Roll the titles. Hello and welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove, joined by John Gibson, and we're here for the match preview of the Bournemouth game on Sunday, but also a look back on Newcastle's 2-1 defeat to Barcelona in the Champions League up at St James's Park on Thursday evening. John, welcome back to the show. How are you keeping? Are you well?
Yes, I'm well. Slightly got over last evening and looking forward with a little bit of apprehension to what Bournemouth brings so quickly after the Barca game.
Yeah, obviously Bournemouth going very well so far in the Premier League. Early days, of course, but they may be the surprise package of the campaign. And we've got a view from the opposition as well from the Back of the Net podcast coming out on Saturday morning, so look out for that one. John, just explain your feelings and emotions as you left St James's Park last night, because I don't know about you, but I left that match feeling rather disappointed that Newcastle didn't get at least a point.
Yes. I mean, let's be truthful. That's with our biased hat on. I was disappointed, but it was streetwise against enthusiasm, wasn't it? It was the people that know how to do it and the people that want to do it. And we'll get there eventually. I'm pretty certain of that. But on the night, I thought we were outdone for cleverness. And the biggest disappointment I had was when I saw the team sheet, Andrew, before a ball was kicked. And as you know, Voldemade wasn't starting, Murphy wasn't starting, the match winner against Wolves and the assist king against Wolves. And that baffled me and bemused me a little bit and depressed me because we went with a front three of Elanga, Gordon, and Bonds, and not one of them scored a goal this season. So I wasn't thinking that they're suddenly going to puncture one of the greatest sides in Europe on the night. And therefore, the first half to me went pretty predictable, which is we would have a lot of huff and puff, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of high intensity, and it would be 0-0. Then we would get picked off. And it wasn't clever. It's because we've seen it all before. And we've taken so long to solve the centre forward problem, and then we're stuck with a centre forward problem.
Yeah, it's just bad luck, I guess, in many ways. I mean, obviously, that was the big talking point after the game that Nick Voldemort started on the bench. And of course, Eddie Howe was asked about it in his press conference. And he said, I can't live in that world. That's the question was, do you regret not starting Voldemort? And he said, I can't live in that world. I have to make decisions for the benefit of the player sometimes. It was a really difficult one for Nick. Of course, any player would want to start every game, but I have to try and manage him in the team and make sure he stays fit. And that was always at the heart of this decision, knowing that we have Anthony suspended for the next game as well. Now, interestingly, there, obviously, the fitness of Nick Voldemort key, but also it's a nod to the difficulty that Eddie Howe's got in terms of balancing the squad. Because if you'd had Johan Wissa fit, then one of them would have started on Thursday, and Newcastle probably would have finished one of the 3 or 4 chances that they created in the first half. As it is, Wissa is injured. He might not even be back for the first game after the international break, Eddie Howe said last night. And again, it is just about the balance, isn't it? That's just the bad hand Newcastle have been dealt. And it's one of those where if you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Yeah, but I won't be as gentle as that, Andrew. Yes, it's all about the balance. It's all about this and that. But we've just signed a club record centre forward, 69 million. No injury problems this season. Been playing regularly this season, unlike Wissa and unlike Isaac. He's been playing regularly this season. He's a current German international. He's our big hope, having played without a centre forward in the opening games of the season. If he's not ready physically to be able to play for us in a crisis, and this is a centre forward crisis without Wissa. This is a centre forward crisis, and you're fully fit in terms of injuries. Centre forward, who's a record club buy, isn't physically ready for the biggest game of the season. This is the biggest game of the season, Barca at home. They won't get any bigger. It's Champions League. They won't get any bigger in the Premier League at home. They're not bigger than Barca. And you can't risk him. He's not quite ready. I mean, I'm not having a go particularly at Eddie, but I'm saying if that's the situation, there's a million questions to be asked. This is our record signing centre forward, our saviour. And we don't go with him. We don't go with Murphy. And I know he tried to say he's got a little bit of Achilles problem, but everybody has when they don't start, a little bit of a certain problem. But we go with a front three of Elanga, Gordon, and Bonds, and not one of them has scored a goal this season. And, we've been playing with Gordon as a false nine and been saying, what a shame. If only we had a centre forward, we would win games and we would have somebody to finish the chances and whatever. Then we voluntarily go with Gordon back at centre forward, and it's 0-0 at half time. Was that a surprise? Not to me, it wasn't. And I'm not trying to have a go at Eddie on his team selection, although if it was purely on tactics, it would be his fault. But of course, it wasn't purely on tactics because you wouldn't do that. But there's serious questions to be asked somewhere along the line. If Voldemort, with the emotional and adrenaline pumping help of scoring the winner, can't can't start in the biggest match of the season. And yet, didn't we get a few hints to that? I mean, he come off in an hour with cramps or less than an hour against Wolves. And Bruno said, with a bit of a joke, with a bit of a smile, he'd never known that before. Somebody so early in the game, centre forward, new signing, come off with cramps. And Nick himself talked about finding the Premier League tough. This is a German international who's 69 million, and we're in a crisis here. I mean, what is not good enough is not sharp enough yet to start. I know other players we've signed have taken time to adjust, etc., etc. But this isn't an ordinary situation. This isn't an ordinary position. It's centre forward, and it's an emergency. And he's just scored the winning goal. I'm sorry, but I would, I'm concerned.
I mean, are you saying that Eddie Howe got the decision wrong to put him on the bench and start Gordon down the middle?
Well, he didn't get it right, did he? That's the biggest certainty of all. He didn't get it right because we didn't score a goal in that situation. And if he did get it right physically, then there's questions got to be asked of Voldemade
Uh,
about his ability to handle a situation like this physically as well as mentally.
I think from my point of view, the way I'm looking at it is that, ironically, one of the things we always say on this podcast, John, is that Eddie doesn't think ahead. He thinks about now. He thinks about Barcelona. He doesn't think about Bournemouth. But actually, that team selection and the quotes afterwards suggests that Bournemouth was somewhere in his mind. And I think that's, again, going back to the difficulty of balancing the squad when you have only got one striker that you deem worthy of start. And it's also a nod towards Willisula. Now, I'm not for a moment saying he was going to start Willisula against Barcelona, but if you think Valdemari can't start 3 games in a week, then surely you start him against Barcelona and then you start Willisula on Sunday against Bournemouth. 23-year-old lad, same age basically as Valdemari. If it's not now, then when, sort of thing. And again, that maybe points to just where he's thinking about Will when it comes to trusting him in the first team. But look, I think this is a question that has been on the tip of everyone's tongue, and no doubt the comments and social media when we put the episode out will come back at us. Whether it is to do solely with his fitness, as in he's got that stamina and match fitness, I don't know. I wonder whether it's more about just making sure that he's available, maybe for the Premier League rather than the Champions League. And again, that will anger some people saying that, but Eddie's the man making the decisions, and yeah, for many, he did get it wrong. And it's also accelerated, John, by the fact that Newcastle did create chances in the first half. And when you got to half time, you're thinking, the first thing I said was, if we'd had an out-and-out striker, we'd be 2-0 up here, because wonderful
We had
cross-back.
an out-and-out striker. He was sitting on the bench, fully fit.
Well, that's the point. That was the point.
If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. If we don't start him and it doesn't work, then, and by the way, this isn't hindsight, and it isn't with the Newcastle fans. It was the talk of the press box before ball was kicked. Hope this doesn't come back to bite us. This is either a decision of a genius or it's a wrong decision. And I'm suspecting it has more to do with Nick's condition than it has to do with Eddie Howe not picking him. I mean, this is he got far too much hype in the first game. I mean, he did play well, and I'm not having a go at the kid, by the way. He'll probably turn out to be something wonderful, and I'm still hoping that's the situation. But he was getting 10 out of 10s thrown about on the first game. For goodness sake, it was a brilliant finish, but the rest of his game was pretty good, but just pretty good. Nothing compared with Tonali against Wolves. All of a sudden, he has this hype, and he's our great saviour, and he's not deemed fit enough to start, and he never come off injured against Wolves. He came off with a cramp because he couldn't last the 90 minutes. So it's a staggering decision. And whatever's the answer, the truth, whatever's the truth, was it Eddie being overcautious with his team selection and not starting him because of that, because he was worried, or was it Nick is not a good enough Nick to be able to do it? Whatever it is, there's something wrong. Because when you spend 69 million to solve a crisis, and the guy is physically fit, hasn't been missing games this season, has just got the adrenaline rush of scoring the winner, and you can't start him, something's wrong somewhere, Andrew.
I mean, I genuinely think it's more to do with the fact that the calendar is full of fixtures more than his overall fitness.
And he can't play 3 times in a week, poor lad.
Well, but this is the thing, isn't it? Like, obviously, he'll not play against Bradford, but he's the striker that's going to have to play until Wissa gets back. So there is that kind of long-term picture of it. But also, I do wonder whether there's a tactical point to it as well, because obviously, what we saw in the Wolves game and what we saw when he came off the bench was that he was chasing down the keeper and he was chasing down the ball. But can he do that as well as Gordon? And I felt beforehand, and we both said it in the preview, that actually that high press is going to be key. Now, Voldemari can do it, but does he do it as well as Gordon? And I think
no, but he can score goals better than Gordon.
Well, yes.
And by the way, that's what, let's boil down football. It's about goals. You don't score goals, you don't win games. Simple as that. And you've got the only centre forward on the books, because Asula, bless him, I'm not bringing into the Champions League starter by any means. The only centre forward on the book. So what do? We start with him on the bench. And you know what that did to compound the problem? It took Gordon away from his best position outside left, and asked him to play centre forward. And Barnes, who was ineffectual against Wolves, was ineffectual again against Barca. And so we lost Gordon as an outside left, and we lost Nick as a centre forward. And by the way, what a surprise, we lost the game.
Yeah, look, but I guess on the flip side, I asked you the question of, if he played last night and there is an issue where he's not fully match fit and he's not available for Sunday, is that an issue? I mean, do you prioritise the
Well,
game?
it's an issue now, Andrew. What's he going to do with Bournemouth? Waldemar, and what's Eddie Howe going to do? Is he going to start him now and let him run there for 90 minutes, or is he going to keep him on the bench? And by the way, he's got a crisis now against Bournemouth because he hasn't got Gordon as an alternative to play a false nine. So what's he do against there? And you just said that Eddie Howe, by nature, never looks to the second game. He concentrates on the first game. Well, if he concentrated on the first game, what justified the pick?
Well, that's my point. I think he's. I think he genuinely. I think he's changed. I think he has looked ahead to Sunday, knowing that he hasn't got Anthony Gordon to play up front, knowing that he doesn't really trust.
Can I ask you something as well? You talked about Voldemar running down the channels and all that, and yes, he doesn't do it as well as Gordon, etc., 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 etc. But I didn't think he looked bursting with life when he come on, bursting with positivity or enthusiasm. He looked a bit hound dog. Was he upset because he hadn't started? Did he think the game had passed him by because it was 1-0 down by the time he come on, and within 6 minutes it was 2-0 down, game over, because we only scored in the 90th minute, game over at 2-0. But it didn't come on and fill me full of, hey, this is what we've been missing. Look at him doing this and look at him doing that. And it's not having a go. It's the biggest game of the season. Voldemar, we might be sitting at Christmas and saying, what a great signing this has been. But on this game, it left so many questions for me to be. And so did leaving Murphy out, by the way. We know that he's supposed to have had a little bit of Achilles problem. But I mean, he has more assists and he gets the ball in quick first time. And I know you would fancy Langa's pace on transitions to worry them. And he had some magical moments, and he had some moments where he ran like the wind, and then his final ball was poor. But there again, you get Murphy on, and who does the assist for our goal? I rest my case.
Yeah, who scored the goal?
Yes, coming off the wing, not playing centre forward, coming off the wing, which is his game.
Yeah, no, it's one of those. I agree with you.
They pick you up when you play centre forward, Andrew. The defenders pick you up. If you drift in off the wing at the back post with a ball on the right wing, you sometimes aren't picked up. And he wasn't picked up, and he finished. That's the way he gets his goals, from the wing. He doesn't get his goals from centre forward.
No, I agree. And on Voldemar, I agree as well. He didn't look the sharpest, which might lend itself to Eddie's point about his fitness. He had a couple of good moments, a couple of good touches, and that's what we needed in the team. And obviously, he was trying to get in the right positions. But yeah, he didn't come bouncing onto it. If anything, he looked like to me, he looked a bit awkward when he was trying to chase down in the first few moments. But it is a difficult game to come into. You come off the bench, the game is kind of already gone. And maybe you are a little bit put out that you didn't start, but professional, and this is football, those decisions are made. But yeah, going back to the first half, you had chances, and it was so frustrating because there was a lovely cut back to Gordon, and he air kicks it, and that should be in the back of the net. I think if that's Voldemar, if that's Wissa, it's a goal. You've got Barnes with two chances that he should have put in the back of the net. Maybe one was offside. I can't remember. There was definitely one good save from the keeper. So they were getting in these positions, and they should be scoring. And actually, regardless of it's Voldemar, Wissa, Barnes, Gordon, part of me do thinks, looking back at Villa, looking back at Liverpool, we let the likes of Gordon and Barnes off the hook a little bit because we were saying, if they'd had a proper striker, if they'd had Isak, they would have won that game. Yeah, they would have done, because an out-and-out striker scores those chances. But at the same time, you're getting paid £90,000 a week and you're a professional footballer, you should be scoring those chances. So, maybe got the decision wrong on the striker, but we shouldn't take away the fact that, there was a few golden chances missed by Barnes and Gordon. That's a massive, massive frustration, because what happened, John, is what was always going to happen. And it feels a bit like it's Newcastle United. Don't take your chances and then get punished for it, because Barcelona didn't create that much, but what they did create, they put in the back of the net.
Yeah, they were clever. They were streetwise. They knew what they were doing. They knew we were going to go hell for leather at them, because, you can't keep things too much of a secret these days. There's a thing called videos, isn't there? And then YouTube, and they know the way Newcastle United play. They knew they would have a wonderful atmosphere with war flags. Everybody would be up for it, would go hell for leather. But sometimes hell for leather is part of the answer, but not the whole answer. They just sat in the right wheels, just said, dum, dum, dum. And I tell you what, I thought they were terrific. De Jong and Pedri in the middle of the park. They're proper players. If we've got the best midfield three in the Premier League, then we haven't got anywhere near the best midfield three in Europe, because De Jong and Pedri in the heat, the white-hot heat created by Newcastle, playing at 100 miles an hour, high press, fans and everything. They were as cool as cucumbers, those two, and just picked it off, trotted it about, popped it off to each other, vision in the back of their head. We sometimes played in blinkers. They didn't have any blinkers. They just popped it around. And by the way, the guy that's had a nightmare at Manchester United, what a finish for both goals, especially the second one, Rashford. I thought it was a learning curve. Having said all that, and having had my little rant about the centre-forward situation, because without question for me, it is a genuine problem. Not necessarily if Eddie's making, not necessarily if Voldemort is making, but if he's not ready yet, we've got a problem at the amount of money we've paid for him in having to play the way we're playing. And what are we going to do against Bournemouth with that situation? It's even more of a crisis now because Gordon won't play. But having said all that, I think it's worth emphasising that this isn't sort of our divorce from the Champions League, that, we're waiting to go to court and that's the end of that. It's the first game, and it's the hardest game outside of Paris Saint-Germain away. The next 6 in the Champions League they're not a stroll in the park. You don't get that in the Champions League, but they're not a dagger to your heart like these could be. We can easily recover from this. It's only the first game, and go on and qualify. So it's not all over. I think, having been so concerned, we are in a right now, in my humble opinion, Andrew, we are in a bigger centre-forward crisis than last season. We spent the whole of last season going on about having no safety net, Callum Wilson injured, Isula Raw, no second striker. But we had a top striker, Isak, that scored 27 goals. This season, we haven't got Wissa, nobody's fault, injury, and Voldemort is not deemed physically right enough to play 90 minutes. Well, surely, and we'll go down there with no Gordon to Bournemouth. We've got a bigger crisis now than we had last season at centre forward.
I mean, I've got to disagree with you. I don't think it is a crisis right now. I think he'll start with Voldemort at Bournemouth, and I think and he'll play the next Premier League game after that and what have you. I don't think I get where you come from, but I don't think it is a crisis. I think Eddie's done something that we're not used to him doing, and right or wrongly, I think he has looked ahead to the calendar overall rather than focusing on Barcelona. That's just my opinion, but I think that's what he's done, rather than Voldemort being unfit and not being able to start against Bournemouth or Arsenal. The games.
I tell you what, if he starts that game, I bet he doesn't finish it.
I mean, that might be true, but I think hopefully by that point maybe he's got a double, and Newcastle United are okay to
Well, I was going to say
come off. But
before we say that it isn't a crisis, a centre forward situation, and this, that, and the other, and really everything's hunky dory. Let's not wait for the team sheet against Bournemouth. Let's wait for the result against Bournemouth.
yeah, and the performance.
Voldemort might well start because you'll gamble with him now. This gamble having backfired against Barcelona, but then what we have to depend upon is his performance. Is he capable physically? Is he in the right mood? Is it going to look good, etc., etc.? The team sheet won't tell us everything. What will tell us everything is the final whistle.
Yeah, no, very true. But like I said, I think he'll start, and I think he'll have a decent game. I hope so. He's my captain for my fantasy football team. But I think
you're not one of these 10 out of 10 guys, are you? Hey, come on.
But I made him my captain before Wolves, and he got the goal, so it was the gamble worth taking. I think, again, I don't think crisis is too strong of a word, but I think obviously the issue is that if he does come off against Bournemouth, whether it is through fitness, whether it's just to bring him off, then you are left with just Will Asula, and that is an issue. But like we said, the lad is old enough that it's got to be now or never sort of thing. So
and
yeah, definitely.
If you bring him off, Andrew, sorry to interrupt, my friend. If you bring him off, Andrew, and it's not for an injury at Bournemouth, I'm talking about. If it's not for an injury, it is because he's physically not up to scratch. Because you're not spreading the load then, because he won't play against Bradford. That's the biggest certainty of the lot, and neither will a lot of the first teamers. The other lads, the fringe players, will start against Bradford. So you haven't got to manage his time on the pitch at Bournemouth because he's got a free week afterwards. So let's wait and see what happens.
Yeah, but again, that goes back to me why he opted for Gordon as well, because he knew he'd be missing Bournemouth, and he hoped that Gordon had a bit more in the tank potentially. But it's a fascinating debate, and get into the comments and let me know your thoughts. And just a reminder, this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. Do it the link in the podcast description box. Get a discounted offer on your plan. No risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you're traveling abroad, lucky enough to be following Newcastle United, then Nord will keep you safe and secure while on public Wi-Fi. Support the podcast and keep yourself nice and safe. Positives, John, from last night. They were in the game. Really, yes, once the first goal went in, they kind of looked a bit panicked for 10 minutes afterwards. The shape kind of got lost. And then there were misplaced passes. Throughout the game, really, there were bad decisions made on the ball. Joe Linton had 2 passes, which if he'd got right, Gordon was one-on-one with the goalkeeper. Now, knowing Gordon, he probably would have missed, unfortunately. But nonetheless, the ball didn't get to him, and you were sitting there thinking, you're not going to get these chances too often. You've got to make that right pass. And I think that's what was maybe lacking from Newcastle United across the board, was that final ball and making sure you play that right pass. And obviously, we've talked about the finishing. But from a personnel point of view, I thought Alanga did really, really well. We saw his plus points, and it is that rapid speed, getting in behind the fullback, the ball over the top, absolutely electric at times. Really, really good, I thought, especially in the first half. He was probably the standout performer for me. Tonali, Bruno, and Joe Linton, it wasn't the levels that we come to expect of them. But again, it was against one of the best sides in Europe. I thought Tino had a decent enough game. The centre-back pairing did okay. They looked a little bit tired towards the end. Obviously, Schar came off. I felt sorry for Dan Burn and Kieran Trippier in many ways. I think it was a polite reminder that time waits for no man in many ways, especially for Kieran Trippier, because he looked absolutely out on his feet quite early on because he had a good battle.
He did have Rashford in his face, of course.
Yes. And again, it lends itself to the team sheet on Sunday and what that's going to be. But as much as I say there was positives to build on, if we're looking at where Newcastle United want to be and the club they want to be, we look back at the Aston Villa game, we look back at how well they played against Liverpool. There has to come a point where we move away from saying, oh, fantastic performance, heart and effort, brilliant, because that's not what the best teams are, John, are they? Yes, they've got that, but they've got that end product. They win the games, and even when they're rubbish, they win the games. And now Newcastle aren't at the level of Liverpool and Arsenal and Barcelona, of course, but it's going to have to come a point where we look beyond the effort and commitment and we say, you know what, You had 3 opportunities in the first half. You should have put them in the back of the net. Yes, you put everything into it, but ultimately you lost the game.
I mean, that's absolutely true. It just depends where you want to pitch your ambition, your current ambition, not your long-term ambition. And yes, we can talk about missed chances. But when I was with Gateshead and my manager used to come and talk to me about missed chances, I would say, "Do you know what missed chances are? They're bad play, because you're not supposed to miss the chances. They're bad play, same as a misplaced pass, a misplaced shot is bad play, and you can't just talk about, oh, we did this, we did that." The bottom line for Newcastle at the moment is that they're going to an extremely tricky game at Bournemouth on Sunday, when they've had a full week's rest and they've got a good points return in the buoyant. We are going to be mentally drained as well as physically drained, and we have only won one game this season. And by the way, you can put in all your pre-season public friendlies as well, where we've won one. So how long do we keep going on saying? I mean, early in the season, the Premier League season, we were saying, well, if we only had a centre forward, we'd be winning. Now we have a centre forward, but we're still saying if only we took our chances, we'd be winning. And as you say, how long can you go on doing that? Now, if we fail to win at Bournemouth, and I think a draw would be a good result, but if we fail to win at Bournemouth, we've won one game. So, if we are as ambitious as we are, if we've got all the good players we talk about, and we have, in fairness, then we should have a better return than that, Andrew.
Yeah, indeed. And it's not a criticism of Eddie Howe, because ultimately you look at how well they've performed without picking up points, then he's doing his job. He's setting his team up right. Yes, last night he maybe got it wrong with Voldemort, but it's down to the players, and that's the fine margin. But definitely, if you're looking at it with a positive outlook, there's a lot to like about how the season's begun, but the points just haven't followed. Hopefully, we start with Bournemouth and then we go on a nice little run, in the League Cup, in the Champions League, and of course in the top flight. But as you say, it's going to be difficult on Sunday. We briefly mentioned it, John, but I just sign off on the Barcelona game. The display pre-match was superb. Back in black and white with AC/DC playing as the players came out. Tremendous display. I mean, you would have had a lovely viewpoint of it from the press box with the magpie rising up onto the east stand. Tremendous. And these are werewolf flags coming to their own. They're absolutely brilliant, and these big European nights, they certainly add to it.
Oh, they've been sensational, and I've got nothing but praise for the boys and girls that do that, because it is really a different class, and it makes our ground a different class to everybody else's when these shots go around the world. And I don't think they ever on television capture what we capture in the ground, because they don't dwell on it. They're that busy with having pundits telling us what's going to happen and reading out the team sheet. Sometimes I wish they would just dwell on the 3 minutes as the teams come out at St James's Park and show you what's happening around the ground, because it's absolutely wonderful. And their fans must have looked at it and thought, blimey, this is a different class. This, unfortunately, we didn't quite live up to that once the game started, but it was wonderful. And War Flags, they have so much originality, so much thought goes into it. What can we do this particular game that was different from the last particular game, etc., etc. It's an absolute joy. I mean, I get in my seat earlier in the press box than I ever used to do, because I want to enjoy the atmosphere before the kickoff. I enjoy that sometimes as much as I enjoy the match. I want to see that. I don't sneak in the press box at 3 minutes to 3 with the teams already out, because the match hasn't started. I want to see everything that's going on, and it was particularly terrific last night.
It was. And just a side point, a lot of people saying that they don't want Hey Jude being played anymore because of the links to Liverpool. And obviously we know the links, Brian Johnson, AC/DC. And I was actually a big fan of trying to get Thunderstruck played before the players went out, because it's my favourite AC/DC song. I think it would set the tone really nicely. And then I was listening to 5 Live a couple of weeks ago for a Liverpool game. And in the background is there, talking about the players coming out. thunderstrucks playing over the tannoy, and it appears that Liverpool have been playing that over the tannoy for many years. So that one has to get scrapped off. Unfortunately, we can't be copying Liverpool, can we? So, but yeah, a nice change last night, and obviously the Champions League music playing was a nice moment as well. But we go back to what we said, what Eddie Howe said, what many fans have said. It's no longer about the experience. It's nice to have that little tingle, but it's no longer about it. It's about progress. And yes, positives from last night, but a sense of what might have been, sense of regret potentially on the team selection. And it's all good saying they played really well. They should have won, or maybe at least got a draw, which I think is fair. But we have to make sure that they act on that on Sunday, get through the next round against Bradford on Wednesday, and the next European game that comes along, make sure that we're not sitting here with the same regret. On to Bournemouth then, and it's going to be really interesting, John, to see the team sheet. I mean, I think we both alluded to it. A couple of surprises in this one against Barcelona. It was definitely not the team sheet that you and I predicted in the preview.
Oh, no way. No
so
way.
Goodness knows what Sunday's going to look like. I mean, obviously we're on fitness for Kieran Trippier. Fabian Schar went off as well. We mentioned Nick Valdemar. Is he fit? Is he not? I mean, who knows what this team's going to look like? I think it'll be the same formation that I can probably say with near certainty. Other than that, I'm not really too sure. Nick Pope and goal, we can probably guarantee that. I think there's a strong chance that it'll be Tino at right back, Lewis Hall comes in at left back, centre back pairing. I think Dan Burn will remain at left back. I think you'll see Malik Chiao in at centre back, given that Fabian Schar took another whack to the head. Into midfield, I mean, in an ideal world, you play your best three, and you could see it happening simply because they'll not play against Bradford. But also, it comes down to fitness, doesn't it? I mean, for you, John, let's talk about first off the back four, and then we'll go into the midfield.
Yeah, I mean, let's say straight away, I've got absolutely no idea what Eddie will do. Neither have you, neither have 50,000 Geordies, and neither has the Newcastle United dressing room as of this morning, with the day off. They'll not know what's going to happen because nobody, and I mean nobody, guessed that team sheet against Barcelona. So how on earth, when we don't know how people have reacted to this physically and mentally, what knocks they've got, etc., etc. If I was a gambling man, I would go on your back four being right and your goalkeeper. I think Trips looked shot. Bless him, he really looked shot. And by the way, if you go back to January when Bournemouth absolutely destroyed us 4-1 up here, and that they are the masters like of the high press. And they pressed very high on our back four, didn't give them time on the ball. Kluivert, who scored a hat-trick, absolutely tortured Burn and Trips for pace because he ran at Burn and then went left onto Trips and absolutely murdered the two of them. I think this is the match to pull Trips out. I really do. And at some stage, you have to get Hall back in because he was our player of the season for me when he got injured in February. He'd also just become an England international. So I think that Trips will go out, Livramento will go right back, and he'll go left back. You look at the middle three, and on paper, they pick themselves, but that's on paper. And I think, as always, Tonali was the best of the three against Barcelona without being as great as he can be, but he was best of the three. I think Bruno looks shot. I think he looks shot, exhausted physically and mentally, and he looks shot to me. Do you keep him in? If Eddie asks him, he'll say he wants to play. He always wants to play, and bless him for that. But do you pull him out and put? You haven't got Ramsey, so you haven't got that thing. So you've got to look at Willock and Miley, and do you go down that road? But that's a decision to be made. In the front three, I think you can all throw them in the air like confetti and see which way the wind blows. Because whatever was said about the front three, we'll get it wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, well, I'll go in now. I'll say Valdemar starts up top. Just on the centre backs for you, is it who are you playing? Is it Dan Burn and Schar, or do you
Dan
think Schar?
Burn and Chow.
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly difficult, I guess, as well, because a lot of people are saying, Botman needs to come back in, but Dan Burn's done nothing wrong. I think he's been brilliant so far this season. Obviously, had a great season last season, but Eddie Howe is cautious by nature, and you've got two defenders in Hall and Botman who've had pretty bad injuries, and need time to be bedded back in. It needs to be carefully handled, and then you chuck in Eddie Howe's cautious nature, then it's going to take a little bit of time. It's difficult for Howe, isn't it? Because he wants to make sure that when they come back, they don't break down like Botman did last season after 2 or 3 appearances.
Well, yeah, in these guys, the ones that don't play at Bournemouth will play against Brentford, whether that's Hall, whether it's Chow, whether it's Botman, whether it's Willock, whether it's Miley, whether one of the wingers that's left out at Bournemouth, outside right or outside. Well, of course, I think he'll play Gordon against Bradford because he hasn't played and he can play him. And he's got to have some decent players in. What he'll do with centre forward against Bradford, goodness only knows. I mean, he can play Elanga or Bonds as a false nine, but he could go back to Gordon as a false nine or play Sula. But that's for another day. We'll be talking about that another day. It's what happens at Bournemouth, which is of concern. And it's of concern because in a different way to Barcelona, this is a test. This is a huge test because they play quality football. They have as many points as Arsenal, as many points as Spurs, and they won 1-0 at Spurs. They've got more points than Chelsea. They've got 4 more points than us. So it's going to be. I mean, you can't pay them a bigger compliment. They've got 11,000 capacity stadium with all the financial limitations that produces, all the limitations it produces when you're trying to sign players. That it's not the big time feeling, although it's the Premier League. And they've got a good manager and they've produced a side like that. This is a real problem coming so close to Barca. This is a real tough game.
It certainly is. It certainly is, and plenty of selection dilemmas to be had. And again, we say Eddie Howe thinks about the now and here, but I think he might think ahead to Bradford and think, well, I'm not playing Tonali, Bruno, Joelinton, so actually I will start them against Bournemouth. The back line's interesting, as we've discussed, because Newcastle have got 3 clean sheets out of 4. I mean, you don't want to rip that back line up, but you might have to because, as you said, Trippier looks knackered. Does Schär come through the concussion protocol? So that's another thing to be thinking about. And then, as you say, up top, I mean, Elanga, I thought, as I said, did really well, but Murphy is the man who's providing the assists at the moment. I do think Voldemort will start, and then it has to be Barnes, doesn't it? So I think that will be the front 3. Well, actually, Barnes, Voldemort, and then I don't know. Probably Murphy, I think, will get the nod. Midfield 3
I'll
will
tell you
stay.
what, if I give you 100 quid, if you got the team sheet right, and I give you 4 opportunities to produce 4 different team sheets, I bet you wouldn't get the team Eddie puts out. And by the way, neither would I, and neither would I, and neither would any Geordies, because who would have won the bet against Barca?
That's
Answer:
true.
nobody.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is the team that I think he'll play. Pope, Livramento, Chow, Burn, Hall, normal midfield 3, Barnes, Voldemort, Murphy. And if he does change the midfield, I think it would be Willock to come in. But, Bruno doesn't miss games, even if he's knackered. And that's to the detriment sometimes of himself in Newcastle. He probably does need a rest. But he'll probably say, well, I'll get that against Bradford on Wednesday. So play me for the first hour and see what happens. We will see. Eddie Howe isn't great against Bournemouth. He doesn't win too many games against them, to say the least. And it's a difficult place to go, as you've said. How would you look at this one, John? They have started really well. They have had a full week to prepare. They've got a great manager. They are at home. But again, even with all that in mind, even with the fact Newcastle United have been hit with a couple of injuries, they've played Barcelona. If we're talking about aspirations and ambitions, you got to go to Bournemouth and get something, right?
Oh, yeah. If we're talking about that, if we're talking about reality, it's going to be tough. And honestly, I'd be delighted if we get a draw. because I can't see we're losing there. I think for us to win is going to be a massive effort and a little bit of a surprise, because I think we mightn't be as exuberant, as high press, as all powerful, of huge intensity right from the kickoff, as because of what happened with Barca and having to do it against Barca and etc. etc. I think it's going to be mightily tough, and I would be very, very grateful with a draw.
Yeah, I mean, I would take a point. Speaking to the chap on the view from the opposition, he expects Bournemouth to want to give Newcastle a majority of possession, because Bournemouth play best on the transition and on the counter. So that's going to be interesting to see how Newcastle United handle that, because arguably we're still Newcastle United best on the counter. So they could cancel each other out. Who knows? I would take a point, John. I would. I'm hoping for all three, but that's more my heart than my head. And actually, I have to be honest, and I'm spoiling it. I'm spoiling it for the guys who are going to listen to the view from the opposition tomorrow. I've actually gone for a defeat. I am just very wary of Bournemouth. And
I think I can thoroughly understand that. I was wary of Bournemouth before I saw the Barca match, but now I haven't seen the Barca match, and I'm talking about physically and mentally what it takes out of you. A match of that glamour, of that build-up, of that full of tension, and then deflated when they scored the first, more deflated with the second, got one back, still lost. Have a centre forward problem. What do we do about this? What do we do about that? I mean, the odds stack up to a defeat, but I'm hopeful it will get a draw. I think a win's going to prove to be beyond us, but this is not said with the heart. This is with the heart. We win every game for me, but it's not played with the heart. It's played with a bit more nous than that. And yes, I think it will be as tough as it's possible to be. And if we get a point, I'll be absolutely chuffed. I dare not think about the possibility of what could happen to us, having seen Bournemouth beat us 4-1 up here. By the way, we finished third in a 2-horse race that day. So, it can get like that with Bournemouth. And as you say, Eddie hasn't got a great record against his former club.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that changes on Sunday. And hopefully defeat is incorrect, and Newcastle United at least pick up a point. Thank you, John, for popping on to the podcast.
Not at all.
As always. And a big thanks as well to the 4 or 5 people last night who stopped me and says, really enjoy the podcast. We had a chap who'd flown in from Dubai for the game and said, really like the stuff you guys do. A few other people had said, big fan of the podcast, which is really nice to hear. So if you do ever see me on the street, tell us, because we love to hear it. We're not afraid of a bit of praise, but it does mean a lot in all seriousness to know that you guys are enjoying the content we're putting out. So do keep subscribing, do keep tuning in, get into the comments, leave us a rating and review as well. And your support is always appreciated. It's not lost on us what a privilege it is to cover Newcastle United and to have you guys watching and listening to our wonderful and maybe sometimes misplaced opinions, but we'll keep going anyway. John, thank you as always. I'll catch you next week. To you guys watching and listening, look out for the view from the opposition on Saturday morning, and I'll be back with the Monday show on Monday, funnily enough, hopefully celebrating Newcastle beating Bournemouth down on the south